Escrow is a neutral third party. In a real estate transaction, the seller will deliver certain items to escrow, including the deed transferring the property over to the buyer. The buyer will deliver such things as their earnest money deposit, down payment, loan proceeds, and the full purchase price. When all of the escrow instructions have been followed, escrow will deliver the deed from the seller to the buyer, and any sale proceeds deposited by the buyer will be delivered over to the seller. Escrow officers follow written instructions from the buyer and seller. Technically, real estate agents are not a party to escrow. Because escrow is a neutral third party, transfer of funds and documents can be fair and impartial. Escrow can be used whenever a third party is needed to ensure impartiality or safekeeping of funds or documents until almost any type of legal transaction is complete. While the key to the escrow process is neutrality, most real estate agents will prefer a specific, trusted escrow officer. Trusted escrow officers can reduce the burden on a busy real estate agent and also provide useful information and tools during a closing or even when listing a property for sale before any escrow is established. The escrow agent is there to help the buyer or the seller, the lender, and real estate agents. If you find otherwise, it's best to find another escrow officer. While selecting the escrow company and officer is negotiated in the real estate transaction between the buyer and seller, in practice, escrow will most likely be selected by the real estate agents. Some third parties, such as relocation companies or lenders, may even insist on using a certain escrow company. Some guidelines to follow when selecting an escrow company include location. A transaction may require many visits to the escrow office, so select a location that is convenient for all parties. Reputation. The purpose of an escrow company is to handle the transaction efficiently while maintaining neutrality. Select a company that has a reputation for neutrality, efficiency, accuracy, and customer relations. Fees. Select a reputable escrow company whose fees are reasonable. The escrow officer will take all the information from real estate sale agreement and subsequent documentation, then incorporate it into a set of written instructions. Both the buyer and seller will sign these instructions to authorize conditions that must be met before closing their sale. While most escrow instructions are prepared on standard pre-printed forms, complicated escrow instructions may be prepared with the help of an attorney. Escrow instructions may be either bilateral or unilateral. When instructions are bilateral, both the buyer and seller sign the same set of instructions. Bilateral instructions are usually prepared by the escrow company using all the relevant information found in the real estate sale agreement. When instructions are unilateral, both buyer and seller prepare separate instructions. This is often the case when instructions are complex and attorneys are involved. Escrow instructions include details on monies to deposit into escrow, such as the amounts and by whom. Example, purchaser to deposit the sum of $5,000 as earnest money, which shall apply to the down payment, and to deposit an additional down payment in the amount of $20,000. The balance of the $150,000 purchase price is to be received from the proceeds of a loan from Alpine Mortgage as lender. Documents to deposit into escrow, such as the deed, loan documents, assumption of loan documents, or assumption of liens against the property. Conditions to meet before closing the transaction, such as approving pest and dry rot reports, receipt of a clear oil tank report, remediation report, or loan package conditions required by the purchaser's lender. Prorations of items such as taxes, hazard insurance, or interest. Fees for the buyer and seller to pay, such as recording fees, transfer taxes, brokerage fees, escrow fees, or title insurance premiums. Escrow instructions may not contradict the terms of the real estate sale agreement unless both parties agree in writing. If there are conflicts in the instructions, the escrow officer can only proceed with the transaction once these conflicts are resolved between the buyer and seller in written instructions to escrow. Initially, the real estate sale agreement is the blueprint for the escrow process. If the buyer and seller agree to change the transaction terms after escrow has received the real estate sale agreement, forward additional signed addenda to escrow. If a party is not available to close the transaction with escrow in person, a properly executed power of attorney may be used. The escrow officer will prepare separate closing disclosures for the buyer and seller. These closing disclosures outline the financial side of the buyer and seller. After the buyer and seller sign all the escrow documentation, the escrow officer will deliver the documentation to the buyer's lender. The lender will review the documentation and may require additional conditions. Once the lender has cleared the documentation, the loan will be funded and they will deposit the buyer's loan amount to the escrow company. The escrow officer will deliver the deed to the county recording office to have it recorded in the name of the buyer, make any seller-obligated payments to third parties such as real estate commissions, underlying seller loans to be paid, and disperse the remaining sale proceeds to the seller. Once the deed is recorded and funds are made available to the seller, the transaction is said to be closed.